In this session, let's understand the concept of callback with another very interesting function, and that is setInterval. This is kind of similar to the previous session where we saw setTimeout, where we were executing a particular function after a certain amount of delay. Over here for setInterval, we will be executing a function repeatedly after a certain amount of interval or delay. The way it works is very similar. So we'll have setInterval, and over here we'll provide the callback function that we want to execute repeatedly with certain amount of delay, in this case 3000 milliseconds. So what will happen in this case, whenever this line of program is executed, it will first wait for 3000 milliseconds and then function 1 will get executed. Now while it waits, it will not just wait over here, it will go ahead and execute the rest of the program, and whenever thread is ready, whenever this timeout is elapsed, it will execute the function, and it will keep on doing it unless we break it. Okay, but let's quickly see it. How does it work? So let me quickly define function 1 here, and I'm simply going to add something in the console, say interval function. Okay, and over here let's simply add some line of code just to see that program continues and executes rest of the code until the timeout is in progress. So let's quickly go ahead and run this particular script. So you see in the beginning, the rest of the code got executed while 3 seconds timeout is there. It executed first time, second time, and it will continue this. Currently, we have not added any break for this iteration, so it will keep on executing this function 1, which is a callback function here, in the infinite loop. So let's break it, and now we will see how we can clear this interval, how we can break this loop. So to break the loop, we have something called as clear interval. So the way it works is we'll use clear interval function, and over here we need to provide the setInterval. And the way we can provide is assigning it to a variable. So let's say interval 1. So I've assigned this setInterval to a variable like we assign a function to a variable in similar fashion, and then we can use it over here. So when this line of code is executed, it will clear the interval. It means it will stop the iteration of this particular function whenever this line of code is executed. So let's see how we can add a condition for that. So let's begin by creating a counter. Let's say c is equal to 0. Over here let's do c++, and let's say I want to iterate this 5 number of times just for the condition. So let's say c is greater than 4, and we can get this inside the condition over here. So what will happen? For first 4 iterations, it will continue to do as is. When iteration 5 is done, c will be 5. 5 is greater than 4, so it will come out of the loop. So basically this function will get executed 5 times. Let's quickly execute this. So rest of the code got executed. Then interval 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, very interesting. setInterval. Also, like we saw in the previous session, we don't have to have a function somewhere else and use it as an argument here. If we want, we can create the function right over here as well. So let's see that example. Let's say interval 2 is equal to setInterval, and over here in the argument of setInterval function, we have this arrow function where we can add the function code, whatever we want to do. So in this case, I will do the exact same thing here. We'll just change the name of that counter. Let's call it as C1 in this case. And so it will be C1++, and C1 greater than 4. And let me call it as interval 2. And let's change this to interval function 1, interval function 2 over here. And of course, the second parameter for this function is what is the number of milliseconds that we want to wait. And we can say 2000 milliseconds in this case. So the first function will get iterated with 3000 milliseconds. Second function will get iterated after 2000 milliseconds. Okay, the interesting part here is during the wait time, the thread will not remain idle. It will go ahead and execute rest of the program, whatever it is. And this is very interesting to see in this case where we have two set intervals, one with 3000, another with 2000. Let's quickly go ahead and run. The rest of the code got executed first. Function 2 got executed first because it just has 2 seconds of wait. And then function 1, 2, 1, 2. In this fashion, whichever timeout is elapsed, that function will get executed. And at the end, we can see the thread is clear. Okay, very interesting. Set interval function, where we'll use a callback function to run that one in the repeated fashion after certain amount of delay. Now, how it is different from a loop? We have for loop, while loop. How it is different from those? The first difference is in for loop, there is no default wait time. It'll run the iterations repeatedly without any wait, without any delay. Over here, we can incorporate that delay. Second big difference is when we run anything in the loop, that will hold the thread until all the iterations of that loop are completed. It'll block the thread. But in this case, when we are using set interval, it is not blocking the thread. You can see that when the timeout is in progress, it is going ahead and executing the other part of the code. Like over here, you see function 2 and then function 1 and 2 and 1. So while timeout for one set interval is in progress, it was executing the other one, and the rest of the code and whatever it can execute, it's executing. So in a way, it is not thread blocking. But loop, if you have a million iterations, for example, in a loop, it will first complete those iterations and then it will go ahead and execute the rest of the code, which is quite different from set interval. Also, important point to remember is when we use set interval, also we should remember to use clear interval. Otherwise, there is always a chance that program might go into infinite loop. If you have any questions, let me know.